Welcome to Chapter 4 of Management 449. I'm sitting here in another one of my favorite spots, making jewelry. I got my pliers, this kind of plier and that kind of plier. I don't know what they're called, but they work. I've got my rose quartz hearts and some jump rings over here. During times like now when we gotta stay home, I like to be creative and get into that flow. So jewelry is another way that I do that. So one of my favorite spots. Chapter 4, you'll need to focus on learning objectives 4-1, 4-2, 4-3, 4-4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you've now covered Chapter 2 where we created the map. Chapter 3 where we looked at the outside. And in Chapter 4 we're turning inside. And we're also going to draw on our unique finance skills to do that. Don't worry. I'm not going to make you do calculations, at least difficult calculations, but you do need to understand them, which is the whole point of this course. So we take you through the questions that are being asked in Chapter 4. The first question is your current strategy working? And that's learning objective 4-1. In order to look at whether your current strategies are working, you need to draw on financial ratios. And you can look at that in Chapter 4. The key financial ratios, and you need to understand what they mean. You get a lot more of that in the team time section. In learning objective 4-2, and you better know this because you should have had it at least 15 times in other classes. What are the strengths and weaknesses of your company relative to external threats and opportunities? So we have what we always refer to as a SWOT analysis. In a SWOT analysis, there's 2 internals and 2 externals. Strengths and weaknesses are internal, opportunities and threats are external. The reason we do this SWOT analysis is to gain a better understanding of a competence. What is it that I do well? And if I do it well, what is it that I do better than others? Then it's called a distinctive competence. And if that competence becomes central to my strategy and a key part of meeting my strategy, we call it a core competence. Okay. And then we get to 4-3 where we talk about resources and capabilities. Now, it's very, very easy to get lost in the trees on resources and capabilities. But here's how I think about it. Resources are nouns. They're people, places, or things. Okay? It's capital. It's human resources. It's a brand. It can be tangible and non-tangible. Capabilities are verbs. So it's something that I do well or something I do, maybe not so well. 2, okay, capabilities. And what we're looking for are the resources and the capabilities that can give me that competitive advantage over the long term. Or in other words, what can give me a sustainable competitive advantage. To know whether a resource or a competence can give me a sustainable competitive advantage, I need it to pass the VRIN test, the VRIN test. That's another acronym. So I lied, you do have to memorize this one. It's not something you can really apply. But once you know what they mean, it's really easy to apply. So V is for valuable. A resource or a competence needs to be valuable and centrally related to my strategy. It needs to be rare in the sense that it's not easily available out there. If it was, then everybody would have the resource or the competence and it wouldn't give me a sustainable competitive advantage. It also needs to be inimitable. They didn't want to say unimitable, so they said inimitable, which means it can't be imitated. The number one way to make sure something's inimitable is to give it a brand. Okay, so valuable, rare, inimitable, and the last one is non-substitutable. So that means that exclusivity is important, loyalty is important. What makes your resource or your competence non-substitutable? If your resource or your capability passes the VRIN test, then it is likely to give you a sustainable competitive advantage. And once you've kind of structured your entire strategy around that, you want to make sure that that competence or that resource is continually updated because you don't want to lose it, right? So then you have what we call dynamic capabilities, and you're constantly making sure that your people have dynamic capabilities. You're updating it through training. You're updating it through ventures. You're updating with stretch objectives. You're setting different objectives for the firm. Finally, in learning objective 4-4, we think about how value chain activities impact cost structures and value propositions. So right now, figure 4.3 should be showing up on your screen. This is your value chain, okay? Now, I'm always amazed at how many students get to capstone and don't know what a value chain is. So I'm going to go through what a value chain is. A value chain, by definition, is the activities that create value. So if you look at your diagram right in front of you, figure 4.3, a primary activity is a supply chain activity, something you're doing to get the materials from the raw material to your manufacturing operations. And then you have operations. And then looking downstream toward the customer now, you've got distribution, and then you've got sales and marketing. Now, those are usually separate segments of the firm. Support activities are still part of the value chain, but they're support activities. They include R&D, technology, HR, and administration or management. Those are support activities that support all those different primary activities throughout the firm. And then a value chain management approach would be looking at the firm as kind of like a caterpillar, if you will, at those different bodies or different units of the firm and trying to manage those appropriately. And we're going to go through those in each chapter. The way that you manage your value chain is through benchmarking. That's a concept word that will be on the assessment. Benchmarking. So when I was a student, I thought that was a fancy word and there was a fancy database somewhere. All benchmarking is this. It's looking around at your competitors and looking at what your rivals are doing and saying, what are you doing for supply chain? What are you doing for operations? And your benchmarking activities as they're being done in the industry. Because there's no magic Bible or manual out there about how to do things in the best way possible. We learn from each other, right? Okay, and what you're trying to get from benchmarking is the best practice. So, you know, they always say, oh, what's the library of best practices? And they think that it's in a library somewhere, but it's not. It's out there in the world, and you observe it, right? So you say, hey, you got an A on the test. What's your best practice for studying? That's a best practice, okay? So we do that not only for ourselves, we look at our resources and our capabilities, but you're also going to do that as a good strategic manager. That's the point of chapter 4.